Let's see the new development in AI telemetry for finding problems in projects within an OpenShift cloud environment. I'm going to go into clusters. And we'll take a look at some of these clusters. So I'll go into our test environment. And this is our NERC-OCP test cluster. If I open up the projects in the NERC-OCP test cluster section, it shows pod restarts. So if there are projects that are failing, then you'll see the pod restarts here. So there's a few projects that are failing. And let's go to the NERC-OCP prod cluster and see what's going on there. Click on projects and we see pod restarts for these containers. And then we see full persistent volume claims. So if a disk is full, then you'll see that there's a full persistent volume claim there. More pod restarts, more full PVCs. Now, this data is sorted with the search engine, Apache Solr, the open source search engine, the very best. And I'll show you how we did this. So we had to add we had to add to our spine for the project model. We added a pod restart count a pod restart count disk that has an integer type. So this is to count the number of pod restarts at the moment. And this could always change. There's always an import process that runs that updates every project on a schedule. And then the list of pods restarting is here as a list of strings. And then we have full PVCs count as an integer and full PVCs as a list of strings. Then we have let me show you the project API because we added some methods to query this data. So we have an asynchronous method, an asynchronous feature method to query the persistent volume claims that are full using this promql statement involving kubelet volume stats use bytes per cluster, and then divided by kubelet volume stats capacity bytes by cluster namespace persistent volume claim. And this gives us that asynchronously. We also have another one to query init pod restarts. And query pod restarts, we have to keep those separate because if there's no init pods restarting, but there's pods restarting, we can't join those queries, or I haven't figured out to, because it returns null data instead of an empty list. So we have to query by cluster namespace pod. We round it up because it's not always an integer value. Round increase because it's always increasing and not giving a specific value over time of kubepod container status restarts total per cluster for the last 15 minutes, and similar for kubepod init container status restarts total every 15 minutes per cluster. So we import this as part of our cluster import process. So I think it's here. Where do we use this? Query pod restarts. Okay, so when we import project data, then for all projects within a cluster, we query non-OpenShift projects, we query GPU project info, we query pod restarts, we query init pod restarts, we query PVCs full. And with that, we're able to gather GPU device data, pod restart data, init pod restart data and full PVC results. And we bring that all together here, where when we, for each project, non-OpenShift namespaces project, we put a value here for full PVCs as a list of strings and full PVC count as an the API uses string values so that it can parse more than just integers. And pods restarting, pod restart count, we put all that and call the import API for projects. So that is how the API works. And then when we search for, when we're showing this edit page here for a cluster, this is the edit page for OpenShift cluster NeuralCP prod in MOC Hub. This is the edit page because it's got, if you have access, you can edit things within this cluster. And so this is the edit page, cluster page initialization method. And we added a query to Apache Solr where we do some advanced things. So we define the query type as edismax. Edismax is an advanced query within Apache Solr. It's called the edismax query parser, and it lets us boost search results based on certain fields and number values. So the way it works is we filter on, we're searching projects and we're filtering on the cluster resource by its cluster resource here. And then we add some boost functions to add the sum of pod restart count and full PVCs count. I could sum these together with commas. I think that's what I was going to do actually, but either way it works. So we can sum things together and give it a score. So if there are pods restarting or there's full PVCs, then it's going to have a higher score, which means that it appears first in the search results. And so when we come to here and we open this tab for projects in the NeuralCP prod cluster, then all of the ones that have restarts or full PVCs go to the top so that we can see them first. And we're using WebAwesome web components with this nice, what's it called? Button, well, here's where I got the pattern. Actually, maybe it was here. Oh yeah, it was here. So the buttons let you add a badge of a certain color above a button, and then we can hover over it and get a tooltip to show all of the pods that are restarting or the PVCs that are failing. So there you go. You can check out the latest commits at github.com/nerc-images/AI Telemetry and AI Telemetry static. But I'm going to make a pull request for this. So there's the update. Thanks for watching.